Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into a topic that affects every single one of us, the markets for labor, land, and capital. We've talked a lot about the markets for goods and services like the price of your coffee or your phone. But what determines the price of the things used to make those goods and services? What determines your salary, the rent for a storefront, or the return on an investment? That's what we're exploring today, and we'll be using some real-world examples from Indonesia to make it all click. Let's start with the biggest one, the demand for labor. Why does a company decide to hire you or anyone else? A competitive, profit-maximizing firm thinks at the margin. They ask themselves, if I hire one more person, how much extra revenue will that person bring in? This extra revenue is called the marginal revenue product of labor, or MRPL. The rule is simple. A firm will keep hiring people as long as the extra revenue they bring in is greater than or equal to their wage. The moment the next hire costs more than they bring in, the hiring stops. To understand this better, we need key ideas: the production function and the marginal product of labor, or MPL. The MPL is the extra output you get from adding one more worker. Let's imagine a small rice farm in Java, Indonesia. The first worker might harvest 10 sacks of rice a day. Add a second worker, and maybe together they harvest 25 sacks. The MPL of that second worker is 15 sacks. The third worker might bring the total to 45 sacks, adding 20 more. In the beginning, workers can specialize and help each other, leading to increasing returns. But this doesn't last forever. This is where the value of the marginal product of labor, or VMPL, comes in. VMPL is simply the marginal product of labor multiplied by the price of the output. So, if a sack of rice sells for 100,000 rupiah and a worker's MPL is 10 sacks, their VMPL is 1 million rupiah. Let's go back to our Javanese rice farmer. The first few workers have a high VMPL because they are very productive. But as you add more and more workers, the fourth, fifth, sixth, they start getting in each other's way. There's only so much land and so many tools to go around. This is diminishing returns. The VMPL of the fourth worker might be 500,000 rupiah, the fifth might be 150,000 rupiah, and the sixth only 50,000 rupiah. Now, the farmer has to decide how many people to hire. Let's say the market wage for a farm worker is 200,000 rupiah per day. The farmer will look at their VMPL schedule. So, what makes this whole demand curve shift? First, productivity changes. If new technology, like a better harvesting machine, is introduced, each worker can produce more, their MPL goes up, their VMPL goes up, and the demand for labor shifts to the right. This is also why education is so important. It increases human capital and makes workers more productive. Second, the price of the final product matters. If the price of rice suddenly doubles, the VMPL for every worker also doubles, and the farmer will want to hire more people at any given wage. And third, the supply of other factors, like capital. If the farmer buys more land or better tools, workers have more to work with, making them more productive and increasing the demand for labor. Now, let's flip the coin and look at the supply of labor. This is about you and me, the workers. Our decision to work is fundamentally a trade-off between work and leisure. When we work, we earn income to buy things we want. When we're not working, we have leisure time for rest, hobbies, or family. When wages go up, two things happen. First, the substitution effect. A higher wage makes each hour of work more valuable. The opportunity cost of taking an hour off to relax just got higher. This encourages you to substitute leisure for work, meaning you work more, but there's also the income effect. With a higher wage, you're earning more money overall. You might feel richer and decide you can afford to take more time off. You might choose to enjoy more leisure. So, does a higher wage make people work more or less? It depends on whether the substitution effect or the income effect is stronger. For most people at lower wage levels, the substitution effect dominates a pay raise, makes them want to work more hours. But for very high earners, the income effect might take over, and they might choose to work a bit less and enjoy their wealth. What causes the entire labor supply curve to shift? One big factor is changing preferences. For instance, over the decades, societal norms have changed and more women have entered the workforce, shifting the labor supply curve to the right. Another factor is non-labor income. If you win the lottery or receive a large inheritance, you might decide to work less or retire early, shifting the labor supply to the left. Alternative opportunities also matter. If a new, exciting industry pops up offering better jobs, people might leave their old jobs, reducing the labor supply in that old market. Finally, demographics are huge. Population growth or immigration, like the movement of workers within Indonesia from rural to urban areas, increases the supply of labor in cities. Now, let's bring supply and demand together to see how wages and employment are determined. This is the equilibrium in the labor market. The point where the labor supply curve and the labor demand curve intersect gives us the equilibrium wage and the equilibrium level of employment. Any event that shifts either the supply or demand curve will change this equilibrium. Let's look at a powerful Indonesian example, the garment industry. From the 1980s through the early 2000s, Indonesia's garment manufacturing sector boomed. International brands were setting up factories, which caused a massive increase in the demand for labor. The labor demand curve shifted sharply to the right. At the same time, millions of people from agricultural areas moved to industrial centers like Jakarta and Bandung, seeking these new jobs. This created a huge shift to the right in the labor supply curve. The result of both these shifts was a massive increase in employment in the garment sector, with wages also gradually rising. But things changed in the 2010s. Competition from other countries, particularly China and Vietnam, became intense. Plus, automation and new technologies started to replace some manual tasks in factories. These factors caused the demand for labor in Indonesia's garment industry to decrease, shifting the demand curve to the left. This put downward pressure on wages and led to job losses in some areas, showing just how dynamic these market forces can be. A shock to either supply or demand can completely change the landscape for an entire industry. Finally, labor isn't the only factor of production. We also have land and capital. The markets for these factors work in a very similar way. Think of land as all natural resources and capital as the stock of equipment, buildings, and tools used to produce goods and services. Firms demand land and capital just like they demand labor. A company will rent office space or buy a machine as long as the value of the marginal product of that land or capital is greater than its price. The price you pay for using land is called rent, and the price you pay for using capital is often expressed as an interest rate or a rental price. The supply of land is often considered to be relatively fixed or inelastic, especially in a specific location. There's only so much beachfront property in Bali, for example. This means that changes in the demand for this land can lead to very large changes in its rental price. The supply of capital, on the other hand, is more elastic. It comes from people's savings. When you put money in a bank, you are supplying capital to the market, and the interest you earn is your payment. What's really fascinating is how these factors are all linked. A change in the market for one factor can have ripple effects on the others. For example, the invention of the internet, a form of capital, dramatically increased the productivity of many office workers. This increased the marginal product of labor, which in turn increased the demand for skilled workers and pushed up their wages. Similarly, if a city builds a new MRT line, a huge capital investment, the land around the new stations becomes much more accessible and valuable. This increases the demand for that land, causing its rental price to skyrocket. So, the next time you hear about a new technology, a big construction project, or a change in immigration policy, you can now think like an economist. You can see how these events shift the supply and demand for labor, land, and capital, ultimately shaping the wages we earn, the rent we pay, and the entire structure of our economy. It's all connected. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this gave you a new lens through which to see the world. If you found this helpful, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. See you in the next one.